as we go along. So I think I've admitted everyone. Yeah, okay. So pastry. So the good thing about pastry is I have found ways to make shortcuts. And you guys know, if you've been around me long enough, you know that shortcuts are my thing. And I don't like to do anything if there isn't a shortcut. I will do the long way around if I have to. I respect process. I respect pastry chefs. I respect you. However, if there's a way to do something quicker, I'll find it. Trust me. But so this doesn't have to be daunting. This can be fun. You know, and like Cindy's doing, that's something you can do with your kids. So Guyanese pastry is kind of like a combination of a short crust pastry, meaning like what you use for pie, your pies, and rough puff pastry. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. It's not one or the other. It's kind of in the middle. So it doesn't take as long as rough puff pastry. And when I say rough puff pastry, that's usually like the short way to make puff pastry without folding the slabs of butter within the pastry dough and refrigerating, folding, refrigerating, folding. That's regular puff pastry. You can do that. But maybe for another class, but I actually found another gem of a trick and a recipe of how to even do puff pastry shortcut. So I'm really excited about that, but I digress. So today, if you're baking along, I'm gonna use 2 cups of flour. So I'm gonna add the 2 cups of flour right to the bowl. And stop me when you have a question. That's fine. Once I'm gonna go grab the butter because I have the butter in the freezer. So I'm using 1 stick and a half of unsalted butter. So you can use salted butter. I have a lot of traditional recipes will call for unsalted butter, and then you add your salt later. I guess that's a way to control how much salt you're putting in the pastry, and especially not to over flavor your dough, especially if you're going to put a filling inside. I understand that, but I'm totally fine with you using salted butter because for me personally, I like a buttery, salt, flaky pastry. So I'm okay with using salted butter. The salt does not really affect the quality of the pastry. It affects the flavor of the pastry. So if you can use unsalted butter and then add about a 1/4 teaspoon to a 1/2 teaspoon of salt into the flour, sifted flour. I sifted the flour already. You can add your salt to the flour if you're using unsalted butter.
Can I check something with you, darling? So you said that you had the butter in the... Oh, hang on. Am I on mute? No, I'm off mute. Yeah, you said that you had the butter in the freezer.
Correct.
Why does it have to be in the freezer?
So the colder... No, when you're making pastry, you want all of your ingredients to be cold. That's one of the ways you get a flaky pastry. So I freeze the butter because a trick that I use is I grate my butter. So normal recipes will say you take the butter, you put it in, and then you work it until it becomes like breadcrumbs.
That's what I normally do, yeah.
I honestly don't like working with dough. I don't like things under my nails. I don't like the sticky feeling. I do it if I have to, but it's not a favorite of mine. So another trick that I do is I grate my butter. If it's frozen, right? And actually, let me go bring it so you'll see what I'm talking about. And Cindy, if you're baking with me and your sticks of butter are frozen, I would go ahead and grate it. Be very, very careful. You can actually wrap a piece of paper towel around the butter to get a solid grip because it can slip, and I don't want you to, Guyanese style, you grate your knuckles. So Chloe would be introduced to real Guyanese tradition where you grate that coconut and it nicks you. So you can wrap a piece of paper towel on the end so you get a good grip and you can start grating your butter. So it's a stick and a half. I'm gonna do less. I was gonna do 2 batters, but I don't think we have time for that. So let me just go grab the grated butter that I'm storing in the freezer already. So here we are. I'll show it to you.
Shauna, before you continue,
Yeah.
one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm using the original recipe that you posted on Facebook.
Yep.
So I'm with the 2.5 cups of flour and what is it, 3 sticks of butter?
So you can use 2 sticks of butter. The other set of butter I was going to separate half and half, but if you have 2.5 cups of flour, you can use 2 sticks of butter.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. So if you're on Instagram, this is what your shredded butter is going to look like, right? And so this is so much easier to work with than having to, you know, manipulate your dough. So I'm going to add the butter. And Cindy, I'll wait for you. Don't worry. And everything, again, you want this, really the trick about pastry is temperature. And the quality of pastry you're going to get, temperature affects it. So you really want it to be as cold as possible. You want to be working with it a short time as possible. So I just grated this amount. And now I'm going to start just working it into the dough. And so the other thing too about Guyanese style of pastry is even with rough puff pastry, the process probably would take about 2.5 to 4 hours depending on how much dough you're working with. With Guyanese style, because it's short crust pastry meets rough puff pastry, you don't have to work with it as long as possible. So as long as it gets its first rest, you can continue to work with it. So I've added the grated butter. And let me get a time check. Yeah, we're making good time. This is good enough. So here we are. That's been added. So it looks regular, you know, flour with little lumps in it. Cindy, how are you doing?
Some water? I'm going slowly, but it's happening. You can keep going.
Okay. So then I'm going to add to this, because I'm using a little less of the flour than I intended, because I wanted to make 2 batters as I explained. So I actually have my extra flour here that I took out because I'm not going to be splitting the batter. I added, this is probably about 4 tablespoons of butter, but for Cindy, for you, you can go ahead and add that 1/4 cup of, of cold water to the mix. And you're going to see when I'm working with it, I'll show you here. I'm not squeezing. I am just literally stirring with my hands, moving it around so that it kind of incorporates. Because I don't want to overwork the dough. You overwork the dough, you get a rubbery, hard dough. So I am literally just moving it around. And then a ball is going to start forming. And again, I'm going around the sides.
You haven't put any water in there yet, have you?
So I just added it's about 4 tablespoons of cold water. And the colder the water, the better. So if you can actually have ice water, ice in your water, and then just before you use it, use a strainer, strain it through, and add that. That'll be great. So I'm going to go ahead and add another maybe 2 tablespoons of cold water. I'll get it from the fridge.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add another 2 tablespoons. just to get this going. And then at the end, it's gonna, you'll see why it's called rough puff. It kind of looks a little rough, but you get the most perfect flaky pastry. So you see it coming together right there? So I'm just gonna move it together just enough until it becomes a ball. That's it. And a lot of people will move it into a square. You can do that too. But yeah, so I'm just gonna do this. And it's not going to be a fully formed ball, but it's going to be together enough that when it sits in the fridge, I can work with it afterwards. And again, this is my least favorite part. All that, some people like it because it's like working with Play-Doh, and they're like, oh, me. I'm like...
No, I think I'm the same as you as well. I'm not a fan of getting all stuck in my fingers and everything.
What about you, Cindy? Does it bother you? Because if it does, you're the deciding...
I hate this so much.
It's a Scorpio thing then. So, okay. Since we're birthday buddies, so we all feel the same, so it must be for us. Okay. So I'm pretty much done. And this is what I have. It's a rough ball. Don't try to smooth it out. If you're an IG, here's the ball of puff pastry. Don't try to smooth this out. And so now, another thing about this is you want to cover it with plastic wrap, or you can use foil, but I prefer plastic wrap. It gives it a tighter seal, and let it sit in the refrigerator at least for 30 minutes to 45 minutes is standard recipe. But you all know, Shortcut Queen Shauna, right? So my mind says if the goal is to let this sit and get nice and cold, if I increase the temperature of the coldness and reduce the time, then I should, create a similar environment, right? So you're gonna cover this with foil or plastic wrap, or you can wrap the ball in plastic wrap and put it in your freezer for 15 minutes, okay? That's gonna get it to the temperature it needs to be without sitting in the fridge for 45 minutes. Because with regular rough puff pastry, that's your first 45 minutes. Then you take it out, you would roll it, and I'll show you what you can do afterwards. But with Guyanese pastry, because it's between, when we take it out for 15 minutes, we're gonna roll it, and then we're gonna put it back for 10 minutes in the freezer again, and then we can use it. And in the meantime, while we wait, I waste no time. Time is money. We're gonna make our filling. And while that's resting again, our filling is gonna chill in the fridge or the freezer to get to room temperature so we can use it. So while everything is going, we're working. So nothing is wasted. So this is gonna be wrapped. I have some already in the fridge. I'm gonna go pull that to show you what I'll be doing. All right, so this is my ball that I had wrapped, okay? So now we're gonna wanna work with a floured surface. So I'm gonna go ahead and flour my surface. And this is where I'm gonna ask my trusty rusty niece to tilt for the Zoom people. So this is what I have. You always want to flour your surface sufficiently. Don't over flour it because you don't want to add too much flour. No, a little up. Yep, that's good. To the dough. But here we are. So I took it out. It's been in the fridge. And you can if you've had it in your fridge or your freezer for a long time, obviously you want it to come down a little bit more to room temperature, so that you can work it. But this has been in there not too long, so it's a temperature where you see it's moving. So I'm gonna roll this out. And the other thing is too, if you're gonna be you know, a serious pastry person, that's fine. You can actually get yourself a metal rolling pin. Also, if you're working in a hot climate, let's say you're in the Caribbean or it's summer, if you have one of these, you can easily put it in your freezer or your fridge. So when you're ready to use it, your dough's cold, your pin is cold, it keeps your dough at temperature longer. Okay?
You know, for a minute there, I thought that was like a tin foil wrap thing that you had there. You were just using that as a kind of well, I have to use the wrap anyway, so I'll use this to roll it with.
Okay, so in true Caribbean style, you know I've done that before, right? Okay, I have totally done that before because, you know, we are masters of improvising. So if you don't have it and you don't have the money for it, you find a way to use it.
You use what you got.
Exactly. So I'm going to roll this out like this. And I'm just getting the end so I can get it. I really wanted a rectangle, but I just want the end so I can tuck it. Then I'm going to take the ends and fold it in a third. This is what creates layers to your pastry. If you were working with making puff pastry or even another form of rough puff pastry, you could use that grated butter or additional grated butter and put it between the layers, right? If it were puff pastry, you'd be putting the slab of butter and pounding it flat, right? Because you want it to saturate the entire pastry, and then you'll fold it in thirds like this, right? So I folded it in a third. I'm going to turn it this way again, add a little bit of flour, and then I'm going to roll it again because this creates the layers to that pastry. So let me show you this way. So I'm really just going to do this. And then I'm going to fold it again in three. Turn it this way. And this is going to be my last fold. And after this, it's going to rest in the freezer for 10 minutes while we whip up the filling, which is the pineapple filling that we're going to put in this. So if you were making like danishes or something like that, every time you fold, you'd add the butter, you'd add more butter, and then you would rest that for at least 45 minutes, and then you take it out. You don't add any additional butter, but you'd make at least 6 folds, rest it again, 45 minutes, take it out again, make another additional fold. Every time you fold is the more you fold, the more tiny layers you're going to have to your pastry. So, for example, when you crack into a delicious croissant, the outside is crisp, but the inside is pillowy, and they're all those. Yeah. That's how many times it was folded. So,
wow.
Yes.
It's a lot of effort going into that. I didn't even realize.
Correct. So, now I have this folded. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it again. And this goes back now for me, Shortcut Susie, into the freezer for 10 minutes. Freezer. Right? So this goes away. And then I have, you know, my trusty rusty hot plate. 1 second, let me get that out over here. All right. So I have that here, and I'm going to get my pan. Okay. So this is going. So for the filling, I have the crushed pineapple. What I did is I drained it, but I didn't drain it. Raise it up a little for me, please. Sorry. Thank you. I drained it, but I didn't drain it and squeeze. Like I didn't press all the liquid out of it. So if you're baking along, the recipe calls for 1/4 cup of water. What I did is I'm going to use my pineapple juice as my water, right? Yeah. So it's building flavor. So instead of me using plain water, because I'm using the canned pineapple, I'm just going to use the liquid from it. So I'm going to add the pineapple directly to the pan. And then I'm going to add that 1/4 cup of brown sugar directly to it. So it's kind of like making a quick jam. And the reason I use crushed pineapple, I know some people puree the pineapple or whatever fruit they're using. They'll puree it all the way. That's beautiful too, but I like the chunks. Because I like to feel like if I'm going to eat a pine tart, I want it to taste.
So how did you get it like that? Did you just blend it briefly or crushed it? Or
I used a can of, I don't have the can here. I used the can of crushed pineapple. So in your supermarket, you should be able to find crushed pineapple. If I'm using fresh pineapple, I blitz it in the food processor a couple of times, maybe 5 times.
Yeah, I think over here we only have like, you get them in the chunks, so pineapple chunks or rings. I've never seen crushed. So I guess in that case we would just smash it up a bit. Yeah.
Correct. So you can put it in the food processor and blitz it. Or if you don't have a food processor, put it in your blender. That's fine. Put it in your blender, add the juice with it, and then, but just if your blender has a pulse setting, it works the same as a food processor pulse setting. So put it in your blender with the juice and just pulse your way, and you'll be fine. So this is coming to a little sizzle here. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon and the 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg because I want it to taste amazing. And so in this, you can also add mixed essence. You can add, some people like almond essence. You can add vanilla essence. You can actually add as many flavors to this as you would like. So the sky's the limit. I'm also going to add a tiny bit, like 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, because where there's sweet, there needs to be salt, so you create a balanced flavor, right? Always, if you're going to do sweet, you can offset it with tart. Because pineapple already has a little tartness to it, a little brightness, we already have that element. So now I want another dynamic. I don't want to just taste sweet and tart. I want to switch it up. So your palate, because you taste different things at different parts of the tongue, you don't want it to be one trick. It's only hitting you on this side. And you're like, okay, you ever taste something, it's so sweet, you just, because all you taste is sugar?
That's cool. Yeah, it just overpowers everything.
Correct. So you want to create that balance of flavor. So sweet, a little bit of salt just to offset that flavor. So this is sizzling, so that's great. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I have the tablespoon of cornstarch here, and I have the pineapple juice. Oh, well, believe me, the pineapple juice is here. So that's the 1/4 cup of water that I'll be using. I'm going to add the cornstarch to this. And I don't want to overcook this jam because it's going to be baking in the oven. So it's going to be cooking again as well, and I don't want pineapple husk. I really want the pineapple to be bright and fresh. So as soon as this is coming to the sizzle and I can see the bubbles and it's fragrant, and I know that the spices have permeated, I'm going to go ahead and add the liquid. And this is going to thicken it up nicely. But because I'm using this hot plate, it's going to take a little to boil. Yes.
Did you add the starch to the water before you poured it in?
Yes. So I added the starch to, well, what I did is I used the pineapple juice instead of water. So I strained the can and I took out a 1/4 cup of the juice, put it here, and then I added the 1 tablespoon of the starch to the pineapple juice, stirred it up, and then I added it to the, because you never want to add starch directly to it. It comes out in little lumps. And so you have like these gelatinous...
I've made that mistake before.
And you have these gelatinous lumps that's coming. So I want to show you what's happening. 1 second. And so, do you see that? It's thickening up. So I'm creating this jam that's thickening up. So I'm gonna let this continue to cook. With cornstarch, you want to cook it a minimum of 1 minute. A minimum. That's your minimum. It depends on, you know, how big a pot you're working with, but the minimum is 1 minute. So this is stirring. I think we have like 10 minutes, so I'm gonna speed up here. And if you're on IG, I'm just gonna continue there because it's gonna be a little more forgiving with time if I'm, you know, if I'm not done in time and you guys have questions. So this is pretty much done. And I'm going to show you what we got and what I'll be working with because I have some that's already cool. Here we go. Okay.
Oh, lovely.
So that's your, and the leftovers you can eat on your bread. So here we
Can
go.
eat that now?
Right? So extra jam. So I'm just going to rest this here and then move this really quickly. So we're done with our hot surface. And so I did some earlier because I already made some for you to go. Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry, there's a message. Tell me you're running out of time. Yes, I know this. Thank you.
Oh.
But yeah, so I have some here that's ready already. And so here's the dough that I had folded already and rested in the fridge. So, you know, your total resting time is 15 minutes in the freezer. Take it out. You're going to fold it about 4 to 6 times, meaning that you roll it into a triangle, fold it in thirds, roll it into a triangle, fold it in thirds. Repeat that process at least 4 times. And then we have this. So I want to cut this because I want you to see what we've created in just that short amount of time. So here we are. Do you see how many layers that already has?
Yeah.
Do you see that? And so that's what we're working with now. And that's 25 minutes instead of 2.5 hours minimum or 2 hours minimum. So I'm just going to work with half of it. Actually, I'm going to work with less really quickly to show you what I'm doing, right? So I'm going to work with a little piece. Again, flour my surface, flour my pin. And now we're rolling this flat again. So usually I start with the ends to roll it down just to make the dough pliable so I can move it. And so just roll that out. Now for the Pinetarts, I want to show you how laid back, because everybody knows, okay, Shauna's an executive chef, blah, blah, blah. But if you've ever been around me, if you've ever eaten a meal with me at a restaurant, if you've ever worked with me, I don't have those airs. I don't think they're necessary. You can be secure in who you are without being, you know, that. So here's how laid back. You can cut your circles with anything, okay? You can use a glass, turn it upside down, and cut a little circle. Obviously, the smaller the diameter of your circle, the smaller the pastry, the pine tart you're gonna get. So look, you can use a lid. Actually, one second, I have a lid. Okay, because I have pastry rings, okay guys? I have a chef kit with all my stuff. I have pastry rings. But the average person might not cook like that. Here's a jar lid. It's a clean, I keep like sometimes flour on the surface top. You know, my kitchen is a working kitchen, so I don't have fancy ceramic jars so my son can knock it over and break things. I use plastic. When he's older, I can have a pretty things and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
And you know, the executive chef's kitchen later. That's not practical for me now. So I want to really show you can use anything. Don't let tools stop you from cooking. That's really the point I want to get. You can create and be ingenuitive with your tools. So I'm using a lid. Press down and turn, because I really want to show this real quick. Here's the disc, right? Oh, this way. Here's the disc you're working with. Now I'm going to roll that a little bit more. 2 up, turn, 2 up. All right, just to stretch it out a little. I'm going to take about 2 teaspoons of my filling, slide it in the middle, and then I'm going to spread a little. I don't want to spread too much, because what happens is the heat from it rises and steams, and it can push up and separate your pastry. You don't want that. So I'm going to push up. Here it is in the middle, right? Mariah, come down a little and closer, because I want to show how you fold. So here's your disc. You're going to fold one ear here, fold another ear here. Now you have that little smiley triangle, and now I'm going to fold up on the bottom here. And every time I fold, I want to press a little bit on the top, okay? And so here you have your triangle. I'm going to open it up and show you again what I did. Right? Circle, little ear, so a smiley face here, little ear, smiley face there, and then smiley face upward. Okay, so you take a fork, and I'm going to press the ends of it down, 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 and down. And this seals it so it doesn't pop up when we're baking. Now the other thing, because it is going to steam, you have a filling in there, I want to create pockets to release that air. So I'm going to also take the fork and I'm going to score it on each flat side. So in, and you can push all the way through, it doesn't matter. In, in. So this is what we got. Can you see? Okay, do you see what I did? Guys on IG? All right, and so that's done. I'm gonna put it on a lined pastry tray. So use parchment paper, line a regular pastry tray, and plop that in, because that's how you want your bottoms to be unified. And so we have the beaten egg. There we go. So this is the beaten egg yolks. And you're just going to brush the top of that. So here are the egg yolks. When I put it on the tray, then I'm going to just gloss over that. And guys, we have like literally 2 minutes here. If you want to pop over to IG, it's going to be better so we can continue. But here you are. Do you see that?
Lovely, yeah.
Okay.
Very shiny.
Exactly. So the egg will give it that golden crust. If you can tear up. If you don't glaze your pastry, it's going to be white and bland and look uncooked, and nobody wants to eat it. So you can also, if you don't have eggs, you can use whole milk. Obviously, the more cream in the milk, the darker the color. So if you're using skim milk, you're not going to get much. You can also, some people cheat and use coloring in the milk or water with coloring. The egg for me adds also flavor and texture because it gives it even crustier top. But if you're vegan and you wanted to use vegan margarine, you could have used vegan margarine in place of the butter, and then you can use maybe coconut milk or water with a little yellow coloring and brush it, and that gives it some color. It's not going to give it the texture, but it's gonna be brown. So this is what we have. This bakes for 25 minutes at 350. And you can go ahead and repeat the process until you've made enough. I've made a few. This is what it looks like. Okay.
Just put it through the screen, please.
Okay, They're perfect. The front has the same, where am I going? The front has the same color as the back. And that's because I put it on a pastry, on a lined tray. If you don't and you put it direct, there's nothing wrong. If you don't have parchment paper, don't lose your mind. But check it. So I would, at the 20-minute mark, I would be checking it to make sure the bottoms are not browning.
It hasn't stuck. Yeah, I've had that problem before. So
Correct.
that's parchment paper that you put on
just
the tray.
put some parchment paper on it. Also, if you have a fiddly oven with the dial, I would actually put it on the top in the center. So turn your tray this way, or use a smaller tray that can go this way instead of this way. You want to take up the least amount of space on the tray, and you want to be in the center because usually that's where the air, wherever it's flowing, is going to be hotter. Sometimes it's hotter towards your back, but you'll get the most even bake on the top tray in the center. So if you have a little fiddly oven, so we have 10 seconds. So I'm going to continue on IG. For you guys, if you have questions, just pop over here.
Brilliant. Well done, though. You've got that timing.
So I'm going to continue here. So if you have questions, that's, just pop on with your questions. And I'll have my trusty rusty niece tell me whatever your questions are. But yes, so this is the way you laminate pastry. Don't let it stress you out. It's just dough. Really, it's just dough. And I want to show you again all of those layers. And that was literally from folding a couple of times twice. The dough is very cold. So now if I were going to make more, I'd make sure that I'd work with this as quickly as possible because you don't want your dough to get to room temperature. You never want your dough at room temperature. You want it to be a little bit colder than that. So I would be working with this. I'm going to show another one. Just roll one more out. So we see how to fold it again. And again, that's all that lamination. So it's going to be crusty. And then I'm actually going to break one of the Pinetarts to show you. So again, just going to do this. Make sure my pin is rolled. And so down again. And here we are. And again, create your tools, okay? Don't let not having the right tool stop you. You can create the right environment. So there we go. That's our ring again. And we're just going to push up twice like that. Push out twice again because you want to expand the ring. When it's cut like that and you use it right away, if you were doing like a patty, you'd be putting it into a pan, that's fine. But with the pine tart, you want it to be a little more pliable. So once it's cut, it kind of tightens up. So you want to release it. So you just roll it a little bit. Again, about 2 teaspoons right in the center. We're going to spread out a little bit. And then in with one ear. In with, I call them ears because to me they look like little dog flappy ears. So you flap down on both sides. And then you flap up into that perfect triangle. And then this is where you see how it opens. If you don't use your fork, this is going to just pop open when it bakes and you're not going to have that triangle. So press down with your finger. Take your fork, indent, indent, indent. And there you go. Okay? So there you go. And then now to release the steam, in. And so there we go. We're going to put this on our tray because you better believe I'm going to be baking the rest of this so I can eat it. I had a big family to feed, so they'll be appreciative. You take that egg yolk that you've beaten. You can also use the whole egg. The egg yolk just gives it a darker, richer brown, but you can definitely use the entire egg. And there you have it. So that is going to go into 350 for 25 minutes. If you have an oven that's a little fiddly, check it at the 20-minute mark to make sure it's done. But let me clean up a little. But here we are, right? So I want to show you. Look at that, right? Look at that. That is the filling. And as you can see, the pastry is crusty and crispy, but you have those layers on the inside. I'll show you another one. Look at that. Okay, I'm gonna be eating both of these. I'm sorry. But yeah, so look at, it's beautiful. Look at the lamination of the layering, as you can see, and that is in 25 minutes. So don't let puff pastry or rough puff pastry you know, get in the way. You can do this. You can enjoy this. The video is going to be saved on IG for you if you want to rewatch or fast forward to certain parts that you didn't see. But thank you so much for joining. I am definitely going to try to do this. I know you guys have been asking. Cheryl asked, I don't know, it was last year. But I finally got to it. I'm going to try to do some more. Definitely DM me. I'm responsive. If you DM me, I will respond to it. If you have a request, just let me know and I will try to figure it out and fit it in my time. But thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you. And I go in and yam. Happy Sunday!